Do you think that, so I'm representing theism, Christian theism to be specific.
Right.
Do you think that if God created everything that exists, for him to make a donkey talk would be something that he could not do?
Well, let me ask you this. Do you
Okay.
think it's intellectually honest to start with your answer? Because what you're telling me is you're putting the cart before the horse, I think. So what I'm saying is what we're doing is we're asking all of the questions to see if God exists, right? It's like you being pulled over by a cop and you're going, "Hey man, I didn't speed." And he goes, "If I'm writing you a ticket, doesn't it make sense that you were speeding?" Yeah, yes. If you're writing me a ticket, that would seem to make sense. However, I didn't speed, so this ticket is unjustified. Yeah, but come on, I'm writing the ticket. Doesn't that mean, you know what I mean? It sounds backwards. So what you're saying, what I'm telling you is what atheists do is we go, maybe there is no God. Let's look into this. Page 1. Wait a minute. There were 3 nights and 3 mornings and 3 evenings before there was ever a sun. What is evening and morning without sun and moon? Wait a minute. There were plants before the sun was created. But plants, photosynthesis is required for plants to exist. How could we have plants before a sun? This doesn't make sense. Wait a minute. The moon isn't a light in the sky. It's a reflection. That's not scientific. And we go line by line by line by line, finding all sorts of errors. And then we get to the New Testament and find these miracles of a dead person coming back to life. We see contradictions that Jesus was the only one who went to heaven, but Elijah also went up by a whirlwind into heaven. Apparently, Jesus wasn't the only one who went up into heaven. There's all these discrepancies. And atheists look at all these things, talking animals and all sorts of things that we look at and go, gosh, I had faith, but that sounds a little silly. And then we file that away and we come across something else and go, wow, I don't really like the way women were kind of treated as cattle here. This is kind of disturbing how God gave David all these wives, in addition to giving him chattel and goats and all sorts. You're like, wow, he's like handing women over his property. Hey, wait a minute. God was okay with slavery here for at least 6 years. This is a little disturbing. And we keep filing these things away as Christians. And eventually we hit our excuse meter level and we go, I'm not making excuses for this guy anymore. Maybe there isn't a God because so many things in the Bible seem so ridiculous. Maybe the parts that tell me God exists are also false. And that's how the atheist gets to, there's no God. But what you're doing is you're going, yeah, that's pretty absurd, a donkey talking. But assuming God already exists, a talking donkey is not that big of a deal. And assuming God already exists, a talking serpent's not that big of a deal. From your perspective, I totally understand what you're saying. My mom said to me one time, God could make a whale live in a tree if he wanted to. He's God. And it showed me that we're just starting at 2 completely different ends. I look at my challenges, my journey, as an investigative journalist. Let's find out if this God is real. Here's the Bible. Let's check its validity. Let's look at its perception. Let's check the things we can check on science. And it failed test after test after test after test. So the ultimate questions of Jesus dying and coming back to life, ascending into heaven, and God existing, I don't assume those things are true and then fill in the gaps with a confirmatory bias. What I do is read all this information and determine, if I can't trust the Bible on all of these things, it's also probably wrong about Jesus coming back to life and God existing. Do you see what I mean? How it kind of feels like you start assuming the conclusion that God already exists, and then everything else that sounds absurd, you just file it away as, well, of course, that's a miracle because God already exists.